I never thought I'd end up here. No one does. We go through life believing we have time. Time to love, to mend relationships, to prepare for the years ahead. But time is a quiet thief. It moves without permission, and before you know it, you wake up one day in a place you never imagined you'd be. I remember the first moment I stepped into the nursing home. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and something else, something harder to describe. It wasn't just the smell of age, of medication, or of meals being prepared in the distance. It was the smell of waiting. Waiting for a visitor. Waiting for the next meal. Waiting for a moment of recognition, for a familiar face, for a sign that the world still remembers you. The hallway stretched out before me, lined with closed doors and tired eyes peeking out from dimly lit rooms. A television murmured in the background, playing a game show no one seemed to be watching. A woman sat near the window, staring outside. Not at anything in particular, just at the world beyond the glass. A world that had moved on without her. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just a place of rest. It was a place of realization. I had always thought of old age as a distant chapter, something to think about later. But here, surrounded by lives that had once been vibrant and full, I understood something painfully clear. Later comes faster than you think. I thought about all the times I had rushed through life, postponing joy, delaying conversations, assuming there would always be another tomorrow. But time doesn't wait, and when you finally look up, you realize the road behind you is longer than the road ahead. That first night, as I lay in bed listening to the shuffle of nurses' shoes against linoleum floors, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: fear. Not the fear of illness, not even the fear of death, but the fear of regret. Had I spent my years wisely? Had I loved enough? Had I lived fully? Or had I merely existed, always planning for a future that was never promised? But fear, I've learned, can be a powerful teacher. Over the next 2 months, I would listen, observe, and absorb lessons I never expected to find within these walls. Some are painful, others eye-opening, but all of them are necessary. And now, I want to share them with you, because whether you're 60, 70, or even younger, the choices you make today will shape the years ahead. So stay with me until the end, because these insights might change the way you see your own future. And if this message resonates with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Together, we can make sure no senior ever feels forgotten. Now, let's begin. Lesson 1. Loneliness is the silent epidemic. The days feel longer, the nights even more so. You tell yourself it's temporary, that people are just busy. But one day, you wake up, and the silence has become your only companion. I met Margaret in the nursing home, an 84-year-old woman with kind eyes and a voice that had grown soft from disuse. Every morning, she sat by the window, watching the parking lot as if waiting for someone. At first, I thought she simply enjoyed the view, but soon, I noticed the way she sat a little straighter whenever the front doors opened, the flicker of hope in her expression before it faded again. 5 years, she whispered to me one afternoon. That's how long it's been since my son last visited. Her hands trembled as she traced invisible patterns on the table, her eyes distant, lost in a past that felt closer than the present. I used to call, but I didn't want to be a burden. And after a while, I stopped trying. Her voice cracked on those last words, and in that moment, I felt the weight of what she wasn't saying. It wasn't just about being alone. It was about feeling forgotten. It was the realization that the people you built your world around have moved on, while you remain frozen in time. Loneliness isn't just an empty chair at the dinner table. It's a hunger, not for food, but for conversation, for laughter, for the simple warmth of human presence. It's waking up and realizing you have no one to say good morning to. It's sitting in a room full of people and knowing that no one is there for you. It's holding on to memories because they are all you have left. I used to think loneliness only happened to those without family, but I was wrong. Even the most loving parents, the most devoted friends, the most cherished spouses can find themselves alone. Life moves fast, responsibilities pile up, and without realizing it, we let the most important things slip away. If you're listening to this and someone's face just came to mind, someone you haven't called in a while, don't wait. Pick up the phone. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. You never know how much they need to hear your voice. Margaret once told me the hardest part of growing old wasn't losing her health, her independence, or even her youth. It's having so many stories left to tell, she said, and no one to listen. So if you still have stories to share, write them down. Record them. Send a letter to someone you love. Because one day, you may find yourself staring out the window, hoping for a visitor who never comes. And when that day arrives, you'll wish you had made more of an effort when you still had the chance. Lesson 2. Health is the only true wealth. I once met a man who had everything. At least, that's what the world would have said. He had built an empire, owned homes in multiple states, and could afford anything he desired. First-class travel, fine dining, the best doctors money could buy. And yet, as I watched him sit in his wheelchair, unable to lift a spoon to his mouth without trembling hands, I realized something he had learned too late. Wealth, real wealth, isn't counted in bank statements or property deeds. It isn't the number of cars in your garage or the size of your investment portfolio. True wealth is your health. Without it, all the money in the world means nothing. He used to tell stories about his younger years, how he worked late nights, skipping meals, pushing his body past exhaustion because he believed success was worth the sacrifice. He always thought there would be time later to take care of himself, but later never came. The years of stress, the sleepless nights, the neglected doctor's visits, they all added up like a debt waiting to be collected. And now, he was paying the price. I think about him often, especially when I see people treating their health as an afterthought, assuming their bodies will always keep up with them. But the truth is, your body is like a savings account. Every choice you make, every meal, every walk, every moment of rest is a deposit or a withdrawal. Some people invest wisely, treating their bodies with care, knowing that one day they will need that strength. Others spend recklessly, burning through their energy as if they will never run out. But eventually, we all reach a day when we have to live off of what we've put in. And for some, the account is empty. I know it's easy to ignore the signs when you're younger. A little stiffness in the morning, a few extra pounds, a heart that races faster than it should. None of it seems urgent. But ask anyone who has lost their mobility, who now relies on someone else just to get out of bed, and they will tell you, if they could go back, they would have treated their bodies like gold. There was a time when movement was effortless, when standing, walking, reaching for a glass of water required no second thought. But one day, without warning, those small things can become battles. And when they do, you realize that independence is not something to take for granted. The ability to lift your arms, to stand on your own, to take a simple step, these are privileges, not guarantees. So if you can still move, move. Not for appearance, not for vanity, but because your future self is depending on you. Walk a little each day, stretch in the morning, take deep breaths that fill your lungs with life. Eat food that nourishes you, not just food that is convenient. And rest, not because you are tired, but because your body deserves care. I know that taking care of yourself won't stop the years from passing. It won't make you immune to time, but what it will do is give you more good years, more freedom, more moments where you feel like yourself. The man I met in the nursing home had everything, except the one thing he needed most. And every day, I watched him sit by the window, staring outside at a world he could no longer reach, whispering words I will never forget. I wish I had taken better care of myself. Don't wait until those words become your own. The time to care for your body is now, because one day, it will be the only thing that truly matters. Lesson 3. The things you own will never love you back. I used to believe that the things I owned told the story of my life. The walls of my home were lined with memories, photographs of smiling faces, shelves stacked with books I once swore I'd read again, a collection of china that had never seen a meal. Every object carried a piece of the past, a reminder of what once was. And yet, when the time came to leave it all behind, I realized a truth I had never considered. The things you own will never love you back. Letting go doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow unraveling, like watching the tide pull away pieces of shore. At first, it was small, a few boxes given away, an old chair sold to a stranger. But then came the harder choices. The dining table where my family once gathered, the books I held onto as if they contained a part of me, the jewelry my wife used to wear. I told myself they were just things, that I was making room for a simpler life. But when a moving truck pulled away and all that was left were empty walls and echoes of a life once lived, I felt a grief I hadn't expected. I met a man in the nursing home who had lived through that same loss. He had spent 40 years building a home, only to watch it disappear in a single afternoon. His children took what they wanted, and the rest was sold: his favorite chair, his record collection, the little figurines his wife used to dust every Sunday morning. I thought it all mattered, he told me one evening, staring down at his trembling hands. I spent my life working to afford it all, and now it belongs to someone else. He had believed, as many of us do, that our possessions are a part of who we are. But in the end, he learned the same lesson I did. Our worth is not measured in the things we own, but in the love we give and the memories we create. I once knew a woman who had a cabinet filled with the finest china, dishes so delicate they looked as if they would shatter under the weight of time itself. For special occasions, she would say, but the years passed, and the special occasions never came. When she passed away, her children didn't want them. They were packed into boxes, donated to a thrift store, their history forgotten. How many of us are waiting for a special occasion that may never come, holding on to things that will only outlive us, collecting dust in someone else's attic? We spend so much time preserving things that don't matter, while failing to cherish the things that do. I've learned that when you downsize your possessions, you upsize your freedom. There's a lightness that comes with letting go, not just of objects, but of the past versions of ourselves we cling to. I no longer keep things locked away, waiting for a perfect moment to use them. If something is meant to be cherished, I cherish it now. If you are holding on to something, believing that it defines your life, ask yourself this: if it all disappeared tomorrow, what would remain? Would it be the house, the cars, the collections? Or would it be the laughter shared around the dinner table, the hands you once held, the quiet moments that never made it into a photograph but are imprinted on your heart? The things we own may bring comfort, but they will never sit beside us when we cry. They will never hold our hands in the dark. They will never whisper, "I love you," when we need to hear it most. People do that. Memories do that. Love does that. So don't wait. Don't let your most precious possessions sit behind glass, collecting dust, waiting for a moment that may never come. Use them. Share them. Pass them down with the stories that make them matter. Because in the end, it won't be the things you own that define your life. It will be the love you gave and the moments you cherished. And those, my friend, are the only things that truly last. Lesson 4. The freedom of independence is a gift we take for granted. I never thought twice about getting out of bed in the morning. My legs swung over the side, my feet found the floor, and just like that, I was up. I never questioned the way my fingers moved effortlessly to button my shirt, the way I could lift a pot off the stove without my hands trembling. But after 2 months in a nursing home, I notice everything. And now, I see what I was blind to before. Independence is the greatest gift we never appreciate until it's gone. I met Henry during my stay, a man who once climbed mountains, built homes, carried his children on his shoulders. His body had never failed him until one day it did. When I met him, he wasn't scaling cliffs or running trails. He was sitting in a wheelchair, staring at his hands, willing them to work the way they once did. One morning, I watched as he tried to lift a spoon to his mouth. His fingers trembled. The spoon clattered against the plate, soup splashing onto his lap. I saw the flash of frustration in his eyes, the way his jaw clenched as a nurse gently reached over to help him. "You don't realize how much you depend on something," he whispered, his voice hollow, "until the day you reach for it, and it's gone." I felt that sentence settle into my bones. How many times have we all taken our freedom for granted? The ability to wake up when we choose, to walk to the front door and turn the knob, to carry our own weight in this world. We assume we will always have control over our own lives, until the day we don't. Henry wasn't just mourning his strength. He was mourning his choices. The choice to stand up when he pleased, to walk outside whenever he wanted, to feel like himself. Because when independence slips away, it doesn't happen all at once. It fades like a slow sunset. First, the stairs feel a little steeper, the grocery bags a little heavier. Your steps feel just a little more uncertain. You tell yourself it's nothing, just a bad day, just getting older. But then the bad days become the normal days. And one morning, you wake up and realize you can no longer do the things you once did without thinking. And when that day comes, you will wish, more than anything, that you had done more while you still could. If you can still stand up without help, cherish it. If you can still cook your own meals, savor it. If you can still walk outside, breathe in the fresh air, and go wherever your feet take you, do it while you still can. But don't just appreciate it. Protect it. Henry once told me, "I thought I had time. I thought I'd always be strong." He looked down at his trembling hands. Hands that once gripped climbing ropes, hands that had built, carried, protected. I should have fought harder to keep it. We are not powerless. We can fight now. Not tomorrow. Not next year. Now, take care of your body. Not to look younger, not to impress anyone, but because your future self is counting on you. Walk a little each day. Stretch in the morning. Challenge your balance. Lift things even when it feels a little hard. Not because you must, but because one day you might not be able to. And independence isn't just about movement. It's about choice. The ability to decide where to live, how to manage your affairs, what kind of care you want. I have seen too many people who lost that power because they waited too long. Don't let that be you. Make your wishes known. Have the hard conversations. Plan while you still have the right to choose. Because when you lose your independence, no amount of money, no amount of regret, no amount of wishing will bring it back. And when that day comes, you won't be thinking about the things you owned, the work you did, or the goals you chased. You'll be thinking about the freedom you once had. And you'll be asking yourself the question we all ask too late. Did I fight hard enough to keep it? Lesson 5. Happiness is found in the smallest moments. I used to think happiness was something you chased, something just over the next horizon, waiting at the end of a promotion, a vacation, a major life event. I thought it was found in milestones, in achievements, in the big moments that made people stop and take notice. But after 2 months in a nursing home, I learned the truth. Happiness isn't waiting for you somewhere in the future. It's already here, hidden in the smallest moments, the ones we often overlook. I met Eleanor during my stay. She was 92 years old, and if you asked her about her life, she wouldn't tell you about grand accomplishments or wealth. She wouldn't talk about awards or impressive titles. Instead, she would tell you about the way her mother's hands felt when she held them as a child. She described the sound of her husband whistling in the kitchen as he made his morning coffee. She'd close her eyes and smile as she remembered the way fresh bread smelled when she baked with her sister on Sunday afternoons. Eleanor had outlived her family, her husband, her siblings, even one of her children. Most of her friends were gone. She had no one left to visit her, no family to bring her flowers or hold her hand. And yet, she wasn't bitter. She wasn't angry at life for taking so much. She was somehow still full of joy. Every morning, she sat by her window, tossing breadcrumbs to the birds outside. She spoke to them as if they were old friends, laughing softly as they fluttered down to greet her. One day, I asked her how she managed to stay so content despite everything she had lost. She turned to me with eyes filled with a kind of peace I had never known and said, "Because I never stopped noticing the little things." She went on to tell me how most people spend their lives waiting for something big to make them happy, waiting for the perfect moment, waiting for life to turn out the way they expected. But the best moments, she whispered, were never the ones I planned for. They were the quiet ones, the simple ones, the ones I might have missed if I hadn't been paying attention. Her words sank into me like a stone in water. I thought about all the years I had spent chasing happiness, working late nights, striving for success, believing that joy was something I had to earn. And yet, the happiest moments of my life were never the ones I had worked for. They were the nights spent laughing over nothing with old friends. The warmth of my child's hand in mine as we crossed the street. The feeling of my wife's head resting on my shoulder as we watched the sunset. The scent of rain on hot pavement, the sound of an old song playing on the radio, the first sip of coffee in the morning. How many of those moments had I let slip by, too busy to notice them? I think about Eleanor often, especially on days when I find myself longing for something more. And when I do, I sit down and make a list, a joy list as she called it. 5 small things that made me happy that day. It might be as simple as the way the sunlight streamed through my window or the way my favorite song played at just the right moment. It might be the laughter of a stranger in the grocery store or the scent of fresh-cut grass on a summer afternoon. But every time I make that list, I remember happiness isn't something we find. It's something we notice. If you're still waiting for happiness to arrive, stop. It's already here. It's in the sound of your grandchild's laughter, in the warmth of a cup of tea between your hands, in the rustling of trees in the evening breeze, in the feeling of stretching your legs after a long day. One day, you'll look back and realize the happiest moments weren't the grand ones, but the quiet ones. The ones that happened while you were busy looking for something else. So don't wait. Pay attention. Start your own joy list today. Write down 5 small things that bring you happiness. And when you do, you'll see what Eleanor saw, that happiness has been with you all along. You just have to open your eyes to it. Lesson 6. Forgiveness is the key to peace. I met a man in the nursing home who carried a weight far heavier than his frail body should have been able to bear. His name was Walter, and though he was in his late 80s, it wasn't age that had broken him. It was regret. Walter had a son, but they hadn't spoken in over 30 years. When I asked why, he let out a breath that sounded more like a sigh of surrender. A stupid argument, he murmured, something that shouldn't have mattered. But pride got in the way, and after enough time passed, neither of us knew how to reach across the distance. The years rolled on. Birthdays came and went. Walter waited for the phone to ring, but it never did, and he never picked it up himself. Each year, the silence between them grew thicker, heavier, until it was easier to believe that too much time had passed, that the bridge had burned too far to be rebuilt. I always thought I'd have more time, he said, staring down at his hands. I told myself I'd fix things someday, but then someday turned into never. He never got the chance to tell his son he was sorry, and that, he said, was the heaviest burden of all. We think forgiveness is for the other person, but the truth is, it's for us. Holding on to resentment is like carrying a suitcase filled with stones. At first, you think you can handle it. The weight feels manageable, but the longer you carry it, the heavier it becomes. It slows you down. It drains your energy. It makes the journey harder than it ever needed to be. And yet, so many of us refuse to put it down. We carry old wounds like proof of the pain we've endured, as if keeping them close somehow protects us from ever being hurt again. But in the end, all it does is exhaust us. I have seen people reach the end of their lives still gripping on an anger that no longer served them. I have seen regret settle into their bones, heavier than any illness. And I have seen people like Walter realize too late that forgiveness was the only thing standing between them and peace. If you're holding on to anger, if there's someone in your life you need to forgive, do it now. Not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Maybe they never apologized. Maybe they don't even realize the hurt they caused. Maybe they're no longer here to say the words you wish you could hear. But forgiveness is not about them. It's about setting yourself free. Walter never got to hear his son's voice again. He never got to say, "I was wrong. I miss you." But one afternoon, as we sat together, I asked him, if you could say one thing to your son right now, what would it be? His lips trembled. He swallowed hard. And then, with a shaky breath, he whispered, "I love you. I'm sorry. I wish I had called." I handed him a piece of paper and a pen. "Write it down," I told him. He stared at the page for a long time. And then, slowly, he began to write. A letter that would never be sent, but still mattered more than anything. Because sometimes, the person who needs to hear the words the most is you. If there is someone you need to forgive, write them a letter of release. Even if they're no longer here, even if the words never reach them, let them leave you. Lay down the weight you've been carrying. Let go of the suitcase full of stones. Because at the end of life, you won't regret the times you forgave. You'll regret the times you didn't. Lesson 7. Life is short. Don't wait to live it. I once knew a man named Richard. He was 78 years old, full of life, and had one dream he talked about constantly: visiting Italy. He had spent years researching the perfect trip. He knew the exact vineyards he wanted to walk through, the little cafe in Florence where he'd sit with a cup of espresso, the ancient streets he would wander. Next year, he always said with a grin. Next year, I'll finally go. But next year never came. One day, Richard didn't wake up. His suitcase remained in the closet, still empty. The guidebooks sat on his shelf, collecting dust. The dream he had held onto for so long died with him. Never lived, never realized. I remember sitting in my chair that night, staring at my own life, wondering how many of my own dreams were still sitting on a shelf, waiting for the perfect moment. We always think we have time until we don't. We tell ourselves we'll take that trip when we have enough money. We'll mend that broken relationship when the time is right. We'll pick up the phone and call an old friend tomorrow. But what if tomorrow never comes? I have seen too many people in the nursing home who spent their lives waiting for the right time, the right opportunity, the right circumstances. And then one day, they wake up and realize they've run out of time to wait. It's easy to believe we will always have another year, another season, another chance. But time does not slow down for anyone. One day, you will take your last trip. You will have your last conversation. You will hug someone for the last time. And the most heartbreaking part, you won't even know it's the last. So don't wait. Whatever it is you've been putting off, do it now. If there is someone you love, tell them. If there's a place you've dreamed of seeing, go. If there is a passion you've buried under the weight of responsibilities, bring it back to life. Because one day, your story will be told. And when that day comes, will it be a story of adventure, love, and courage? Or will it be a story of almost, of dreams unfulfilled, of words left unsaid, of time wasted waiting? I challenge you to do one thing today. Write down something you've been delaying, something that has been sitting in the back of your mind, waiting for someday. And don't just write it down. Make a plan to do it within the next year. Call it the 1-year challenge. Book the trip. Make the phone call. Start the project. Say I love you. Say I'm sorry. Say yes to something that scares you. Because if Richard taught me anything, it's that dreams don't die because they are impossible. They die because we wait too long to live them. And life, my friend, is far too short to wait. 2 months in a nursing home changed me in ways I never expected. I walked in thinking I understood life, believing I had all the time in the world. But I walked out with a truth that settled deep in my bones. We are all running out of time. I saw loneliness in the eyes of those who had given everything to their families, only to find themselves forgotten. I saw regret weigh heavy on the shoulders of men who wished they had taken better care of their bodies, who once had everything but could no longer lift a spoon to their lips. I saw the fading light in the faces of people who had spent a lifetime collecting things, only to realize too late that the things we own will never love us back. I met people who had lost their independence and longed for the days when they could get out of bed without help, who wished they had cherished the freedom they once had. I sat with those who had spent decades holding grudges, waiting for an apology that never came, only to learn that forgiveness was never for the other person. It was for them. And I listened to stories of people who had waited too long to live, who had spent their lives saying, one day, only to wake up and realize that one day never came. I don't want that for you. You don't have to wait until you're in a nursing home to learn these lessons. So while you still can, live fully, love deeply, forgive freely, move while your legs still carry you. Speak the words your heart has been holding back. Stop waiting for happiness to arrive and start noticing the little moments that make life worth living. Because one day, your story will be told. And when that day comes, make sure it's a story worth telling. If this message spoke to you, share it with someone you love. Let's make sure no senior ever feels forgotten. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel, because these lessons aren't just mine. They belong to all of us.